Okay, lovely. So welcome everybody to this briefing all about the NPQs for the leadership route. So we're going to walk you through different bits of what the programme looks like. So I'll move on to the next slide. But essentially, you should be here if you're thinking about doing NPQSL, NPQH, NPQEL. If you're interested in one of the others, then catch up with Tom towards the end and he'll let you know when specialist briefings are so that you can pick up the specialist briefing. So just so you're aware that you're here for the right one. So it's either the senior leadership, the headship, or the executive leadership that we're going to talk about today. Okay. So what we're going to do is just introduce you to the Outstanding Leaders Network, a partnership that we're part of, and best practice, so that you can see how the two stick together, and also to give you an indicator of what those programs look like while you're thinking about, and I'm delighted you're here, while you're thinking about which program you want to join, when you're thinking about which organisation you want to join. So it's really important that you get the right match for you and you're on the right program for you, and make sure hopefully that you understand what we're all about and how we put the structure of the programs together. And it really is, as it says on that kind of final bullet point, really to get you to think about the route, the NPQ leadership route, and want to find out more about it, and then therefore to apply for one of those three programs that we're going to talk about. And it is, it is really important, and I keep reiterating that you understand exactly what it is, in essence, that you're going to let yourself in for the next 18 months, because it's an 18-month programme, whether that's SL, H or EL. Okay, it's all across 18 months. So as we move on to the next slide, this is really about us as an organisation, so Best Practice Network and the Outstanding Leadership Partnership. It's about our values and our moral purpose and what we stand for, and I think that's a really important point to make, because you've got to feel like you're going to join for your journey through your leadership programme the right organisation for you, and it's a really important one for you to consider. What we really had underpinning what we do and the reason that we do things are key values that we really sit together and feel are really important, and they are round in that little circle. It's about inspiring learning. It is about you as adult learners wanting to really pull your learning through. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want to continue your learning journey and pick up this qualification. We really look at how we can work collaboratively together, and that's as participants, how you work together with facilitators, which Lyndon will pick up a little bit with you later, how you work together with the whole organisation. And it's really important that we get that collaboration. We really want to hear your feedback. We do pick up on your feedback, and we always look at how we can tweak and improve things, and that's been true of the cohorts that we're currently working with. Really acting with integrity. So that is a key value, having that moral purpose. We're here because we're all about children, and making sure that we keep at the core that moral purpose of what's really important, what's important for children, how we as leaders, educational leaders, get the best for our children, get the best for the students we have in our care. And by doing that, how do we develop ourselves, but how do we then manage to develop others on that journey as well? And making sure, and best practice is really key. That is one of the key values that underpins our work, and making sure that integrity is really important. And then obviously striving for excellence. And you'll see that there's some satisfaction rates at the bottom. And I think it's really important to point out that we look at the satisfaction rates very carefully for participants, by group, by online, by face-to-face. And our satisfaction rates are very high across the programmes, across all programmes, but particularly strongly across the leadership programmes. And it's really important for us that we get the best leaders out of you, that you become the best leaders, and therefore you are going to, if you like, dissipate and disseminate that into your own schools and the schools that you go on to lead. For some of you, or are leading, some of you will already be heads and want to extend that onto that wider executive leader picture. There's some other bits and pieces on there that I'm not going to go into, but it's about how we support your professional learning. So you can see from the data on there that we've been a provider since 2012. We've had an awful lot of participants go through, whether it's this iteration and they're currently working their way through, or whether it's previous iterations of participants over the last 3 years as well. It's a really strong partner-led model. So we have a lot of partners that we work with, that we develop that partnership approach with, and we also work together with the apprenticeship team and an international team. So Jamie's going to talk to you a little bit about apprenticeship route and the international route a little bit later on, so that you can see how that sits together. You can also see that best practice network and outstanding leaders partnership are also involved in different areas like HLTA and the SENCO, as well as the wider suite of NPQs that we have as well. So enough a little about that, but let's just move on to the next slide so that we can see why you might want to consider working with us. So when we had our Ofsted last year, they were really positive, very, very positive about the whole programme, but they were also very positive about those underpinning values and vision that we have. And the programmes, when we put the structure together, are very much built on evidence. We've structured it so that we make sure we've got evidence, we've got that what we call expert practice pieces. So we take on contextual information from experts in their field, from people who are doing the job in that field, and we make sure we've got strong quality-led practice at whatever level is most appropriate to the programme that you're going to be looking at. We build knowledge. So that second bullet point is the way the structure is put together. We make sure that we build your knowledge, we build your skills, and we build it very much like you'll recognise in schools by building sequential curriculum. It's exactly the same. We build that progressive and sequential curriculum where you keep building, you have an opportunity to revisit, repeat, and apply your learning. So we help you with the knowledge acquisition. We also help you with the application. So you're building that and making those links between the different parts of the programme, the different structure of the programme, and the areas that we'll come on to, the content areas that the DfE say we must cover with you, and all the statements that they want you to have built into that as well. So very like it is a curriculum design in much the same way that lots of you in school have been looking at your own curriculum designs. It's about how we make use of our network and that partnership network that we have. And we use those partnerships to make sure we support professional development locally. We look at geographical grouping so that we put you into groups as far as possible that are geographically close to where you live or work. And we also look at how we can use those networks to support your professional development. So whether that might be to do with having speakers, it might be to do with those practice pieces. It might actually also to do with how you form your own partnership networks. So that kind of support mechanism of your own, and we put you together to develop that support mechanism, as well as using that wider network that we have of partnerships and delivery partners. A lot of our facilitators come through delivery partners. So again, you might find that there's somebody that is local to one of your schools. That could also be helping facilitate. And again, Linda might pick that up and he'll be one of those facilitators that might actually be delivering in the local area to him. And then we have the team that sit behind, so that wider workforce. You've got your facilitators, your online leadership performance coaches, but then we've got the wider workforce, like Tom and his team, like Jamie and his team, who support you. And they do it in lots of different ways, but ultimately that core moral purpose is still there. So we have a team that sits behind those that are facilitating, those that you might see face to face, that support you with unpacking the paperwork, making sure you're in the right place at the right time, and making sure that, you know, if you do have a problem attending something, or if something happens, there's always a solution. And I think that's a really important point to make about how we work with one another to make sure that your journey through the programme is as smooth as it possibly can be. and everybody involved in the wider workforce works together to do that. So we are very much involved, and it's all sorts of layers in making sure the 18-month journey that you're having is as productive for you as it possibly can be, to make sure it has the appropriate impact. Okay, so let's get into the programs themselves. So as I say, you've got these 3 leadership programs. The language probably sounds very familiar to you because the previous iteration had the same language, but it is quite different. So whereas the previous iteration we had 4 programs, we're now looking at 8 programs, and 3 of those programs are leadership programs. I'm not going to read the slide, but you need to consider which of these programs best suits where you are on your leadership journey. Okay? And it's really thinking about your context. I know, having looked at applications, that sometimes context can be very different, and job titles can be very different within those schools. And it's about where are you on the journey of either heading for senior leadership, headship, or executive leadership. That means that programme is right for you. If you're not sure, then we'd always redirect you to the frameworks and have a look at the frameworks and see what the free frameworks are saying about each of those different programmes, and therefore again which one would suit you most. The programme, as I said, is 18 months in duration, and then you go on to do a final assessment, and I'll explain how that's different. If you are or have undertaken one of the previous NPQs, you will have been involved in a project during that time. There is no project anymore. The project has gone, and you instead build your knowledge sequentially through a series of elements within each cycle that we're going to look at in a minute. So I just wanted to make that clear. You come to the end and you do what's called a summative assessment task, and that is an unseen case study, and we'll look at that in a minute. So it's very much about building your knowledge, so a series of components that we build with you over 18 months towards that final summative assessment task. Okay. We're just going to pick that up now. So the summative assessment task, I think everybody wants to know what happens at the end. So we'll start with what the end is, and then we'll go backwards in essence. To get to the qualification, you have to undertake the 18 months of the programme, and there's a 90% engagement. That's that last bullet point, which is 90% engagement against the different components of the structure. And then when you've got 90% engagement, you have to then go forward to do the summative assessment task. And the fulfilment, the successful passing of that is what will give you the qualification. The summative assessment task, going back up to the second bullet point, is a case study. And it's a case study that is appropriate to your level of the programme. Okay, so there's one for SL, there's one for H, there's one for EL. It could be any phase, but the important message is that it allows you to demonstrate your understanding of the framework that you've been working through. It allows you to show your understanding of your knowledge in what's called the learn that and learn how to statements. And if you've been working with ECTs, you'll see that that's part of the whole golden thread, and that language is really very familiar to you. The learn that and learn how to statements are what underpin the frameworks. So the SAT has its own mark scheme, and marks are awarded for those learn that and learn how to statements that you will respond to within that unseen case study. It's quite a short case study response, and it's within an 8-day window. And I'm not going to read all that through, but you can see how they put that. So there's no placement. If you use the placement, there's no placement. So if you've got head teachers who previously studied NPQH, for example, no project, no placement. It's very much building that understanding of the curriculum towards this final part of this final points of this final summative assessment task. You on the summative assessment task have an 8-day window And that allows you to do the reading, to make the connection with the content areas, the statements. And because of the way we have structured it, all of the things that you've been doing working up to that will have built that knowledge. You will have had the opportunity to apply that knowledge so that you have that insight into that expectation of that final summary assessment task, summative assessment task. It doesn't come as a surprise, and we build into the leadership programs an opportunity to look at an example one at the end. We build up during the course of 18 months the language that you will get used to, like, in preparation for that. So that's the end, that's what you're aiming towards. This is the structures, how we put it together. So the DfE have 10 content areas, and you may already be familiar with those. Those 10 content areas are all covered through the leadership programs, all 10 content areas, and we break those content areas down into cycles. So you will cover all 10. Implementation, you'll see that we have a short course, we introduce implementation, but then we revisit implementation in each of the cycles, because implementation is one of the content areas that is weighted more heavily than the other content areas in a summative assessment task at the end. So we make sure we keep revisiting that implementation. So they're the 10 content areas. Sitting with each of those content areas are a number of learn that and learn how-to statements. Quite a lot of learn that and learn how-to statements. So rather than give you the whole framework document in one go, we again chunk it down and we introduce you to those statements in a stepped way to build up your knowledge in a stepped way so you can see the structure build. And we scaffold that. So we scaffold those statements for you, backed up with evidence-based research, backed up with contextual information, and the different components that we do. What you do during the programme then, component-wise, and we'll look at the graphic shortly, is have elements that are face-to-face days, you have online learning, you have something called practice activities that are linked to your online learning, and then you have something called a formative assessment task, which allows you to apply your learning in a more elongated time span. You do that each cycle, and accompanying that, you have a leadership development record, and it's your record, and that record is how you look at what you need to build on. So what do I know lots about? I might know lots and lots about professional development, but there might be some areas within professional development that I need to hone my knowledge a little bit more. I might need to go and look in a particular direction for that. And that allows you to find your own pathway. I think that's a really important point, your own pathway through the whole structure of the programme by identifying what you need to work on and what you need to develop further. Okay. And that document is something that you will bring to your sessions with your leadership performance coach. And we'll have a look at how that works as we build that today. I'm not going to go in detail against all these slides, except to say this is a kind of very simplistic way of looking at the programme overview structure. It gives you your expected hours. You can see for EL over a period of time, your learning hours are 124, and it's broken down into these pathways. You have an induction stage. So you have that initial induction stage where you have an induction hour, and you start looking at that initial needs of what you might need to be working at for the first cycle. And then you have a timeline of approximate hours against the other three cycles, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And those cycles are repeated. So you'll see that there's a repetition of those cycles. So one cycle is not 36 hours of face-to-face, obviously. You have one face-to-face day in each cycle. And then that culminates in your summative assessment stage. The stages and the cycles are the same for each of the leadership programs. So that graphic will look the same, the hours are marginally different. So if you're looking to do EL, obviously the hours are slightly longer than they are if you're doing the H or the SL. So I'm just going to move the next slide on just so you can see the differences. So there's your NPQH structure. And then your NPQSL structure. So the structure is exactly the same, the hourage is slightly different. And that's because the number of days that you're expected to attend are slightly different, and the hours of one-to-one coaching are slightly different. The number of online courses are the same. So let's have a little look at how that looks in practice. Okay, busy, lots and lots on this graphic, so let's take it very simply. I'm going to start with the induction phase, that first column if you like. And within that you get a short course on school improvement and implementation, and that's where we really focus. So your initial induction phase and that programme induction starts with that school improvement and implementation, and then a group coaching if you're looking at NPQSL. You'll find some subtle differences. Cycles 1, 2 and 3 and 4 are the same for each of the programmes. So you'll see that cycle 1, you have what's called a short course, a short online course again, which introduces ethical principles and behaviours. Ethical principles and behaviours are not one of the content areas, but again, what makes us slightly different is that we felt that they were incredibly important to put into the structure of the programme. That your ethical principles and your leadership behaviours underpin who you are and how you deliver your leadership. And actually the feedback we've had from that short course and the face-to-face day has been incredibly positive, and makes people think about how they present themselves, the language they use, the behaviours that they employ. And then you again get a group coaching session in that cycle with your leadership performance coach. Then an opportunity to do a formative assessment task, which is a slightly longer task, which you take into your context, so it's contextualised. And then you have a one-to-one coaching session with your leadership performance coach, who then will work through the outcomes of your learning in that cycle, what you've taken from your learning online, your face-to-face and your formative assessment tasks, and talk you through that, where are we up to, and then take you on to where you start your next cycle, or cycle 2. Cycles 2, 3 and 4 are where you cover the other 9 content areas, and we take 3 content areas per cycle to look at, and that's where we break it down and chunk it down. And the cycle is the same each time. We start with a face-to-face. So the face-to-face will always introduce a cycle, and that gives you an opportunity on the face-to-face day to think about your prior learning, to be introduced to the new concepts around the new content areas. For example, leading culture and ethos covers school culture, covers behaviour, and it covers professional development. You are introduced to those 3 content areas, you get a chance to do some tasks within those 3 content areas, and then you think about at the end of that face-to-face day, where is it I might need to take my learning before I start the online course? And that takes you into the online course. And those longer online courses, cycle 2, 3 and 4, are 3 weeks in duration each. And then you follow the same process through, and that's repeated to cycle 4. At the end of those cycles for SL, you have the summative assessment task. Okay, so if we take this onto the slide that is slightly different, very subtle difference for NPQH and NPQEL. You will find that at the end of the induction, you have a one-to-one coaching session. So you have slightly more one-to-one coaching. For H and EL, you have an additional day before you get to the summative assessment task. And that additional day, we have a look at your learning. We have an opportunity to look at the SAT in more detail. We do look at the SAT examples in SL on day 4, but we have more time because we have an additional day. And EL also has a 2-day residential at the beginning of the programme. So EL has 6 days in total, H has 5, and SL have 4. I think there's probably enough information there that I've given you that tells you the structure of the course. You will meet during the 18 months of your programme, your face-to-face facilitators, but your main permanent, I suppose, person that you see in more detail and with more time is your leadership performance coach. All are really important. All are people that contribute to your learning in different ways. And what I'd like to do now is just hand over to Lyndon so he can talk you through what it's like to be a participant, but also what being facilitator is like, and how an honest view of what these programs are like from a leadership perspective. Lyndon, over to you.
Thanks, Yvonne. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Yeah, so as Yvonne says, I have experience of being an EL participant. That was about 3 years ago. That was the previous model. And I would absolutely say that in my view, from a facilitator's perspective, I think this new model is really, really good. I think it's beneficial in terms of workload that actually those 2 big projects have gone. The assessment being more of an ongoing live process, I think is far more meaningful, but it's also easier for you in terms of manageability. So I've worked with best practice for quite a few years in both of those capacities, and I have been a facilitator for all of the 3 programs that Yvonne's just taken you through. I have to say it is an absolute privilege to be able to facilitate this program. A, because I think the program is genuinely excellent, but also B, because people like yourselves who come on these programs with their eyes open, who are keen, who are wanting to learn, who are inquisitive, who enjoy professional challenge, who enjoy working collaboratively with other leaders. I think that's the part that I enjoy immensely. And the feedback also suggests that although there's really positive feedback about the coaching element and different aspects, the face-to-face days where you come together, and now that we are thankfully able to come back together into a room, they go down so well because like-minded people sit in the same room, and it doesn't matter whether I'm from a primary phase, secondary phase, special school, faith school. Really, in most cases, that doesn't really matter. What I'm doing is I'm signing up to a program where I just want to know about leadership. Many people who do sign on to the programs, as you'll have seen from the slides previously, they're not always quite sure where they want to go with their leadership. They may be thinking, I've done a bit of this. Possibly I might be thinking about deputy headship or departmental lead, but I'm not quite sure. My experience, I don't know about you, Vanessa, my experience is that many people who come onto one of these leadership programs have those doubts, anxieties, questions, concerns clarified for them. And very often it's very positive in the sense that, yeah, I want a bit more of this. I have now got the confidence and the skills to be able to go on to the next level. The programs are, I think, really well balanced. So let's be honest, you are taking on a big piece of work, and otherwise you wouldn't have signed up to or be thinking of signing up to this program. You take on a big piece of work, but I think that's manageable, and you can do that in bite-sized chunks now. Thinking about the face-to-face days, the people I've worked with, and I've worked with lots and lots of groups now, the real benefits of the days are these. I want to challenge myself, and people do that. And it's very much a cliche, but the more you put into this, the more you get out of it. I also want to be working with people who will challenge me as a result of doing the same program. And that people take away every time they have a face-to-face day. We have a little bit of flexibility within the program. We follow it pretty closely. But if I'm working with a group and they run with a professional discussion or they run with some feedback following a task, we can allow that to flow, because that's when people really gain from articulating their thinking, articulating their learning, and probably the most important part of all of this, which is why you're thinking, do I sign up for a program? So what does that mean for me as a leader? So what does that mean for me going back to my school or my schools? And so what is the impact of me as a leader? That's the most important bit. It's really the only bit that matters. I've been doing all of this online learning. I've had great challenging conversations with my coach. I've gone to face-to-face days. I've read and read and read. I've looked at the best research that there is to look at. And by the way, these programs are really well based on the best research that there is out there. But the killer question is, so when I leave this room, what is that going to do for me, and what difference is that going to make? I think you've got a huge amount of influence as a leader, but the program will give you more knowledge, it will give you more confidence, it will give you a network of people. Sometimes people go away from NPQH. I'm working with somebody in our trust now who still has a WhatsApp group from their NPQH group 6 or 7 years ago. So you grow those relationships and you keep those relationships. Really important, because when we talk about senior leadership roles and headship, executive headship, it can feel lonely, but you should never feel alone. So you've built up that network of people who you can talk to, discuss with, challenge you, get clarity from. I think Vanessa's touched on some really key words as well, which from a participant's point of view and the facilitator's point of view, I would absolutely underline with double red pen as being really critical. Vision and values, really central. When we start to work with leaders, whether they're on the SL, NPQH or EL, we always really start by thinking about what makes you the leader that you are, and what sort of a leader would you like to be? And a lot of that is, well, what is inside me that I think is good in terms of what successful leadership looks like. So that is central and very important. Some other words which we developed strongly throughout the program are words like culture, setting the temperature. The leader is the person who is the most significant role model in that school. So if you want to come onto one of these programs, you will reflect heavily on how you articulate the sort of leader that you think you want to be, how other people perceive you to be in terms of a leader, and how you can get even better at that. And we learn from people that have done a brilliant job, and we learn from leaders that maybe haven't done such a brilliant job. And in the room and on the course, you will meet with a group of people who you have your face-to-face days with. You'll have other colleagues who you are in an online group with, so you'll get loads and loads of really good relationship building, professional dialogue, exchange of views, but also to challenge you, because I don't know about you, but sometimes when we go higher up in leadership, maybe there are fewer people who feel it's their place to actually give you that professional challenge. Well, NPQSL, H and EL give you that professional challenge, which in turn will give you high quality feedback, which in turn will help you to go back to your LDRs, your leadership development records, and have a think about simply, what do I think I do really well? Where am I a bit gappy? Where are there some bits about my leadership skills, my knowledge, my behaviors, which maybe I need to do some work on? What would that look like? What would good look like? How can I implement that? How can I make changes? And how can I be a better leader? So I think they're the really key things for me. Vanessa has also mentioned high levels of collaboration. When we did these programs during COVID, I think we tried to do the best job we could over Zoom. Many people have said, and apart from me internationally, many people have said it was a good second best, but the very best option is for me to be in the room with those people having these conversations. If you're thinking about an international group, we pretty much run the day exactly as it is in the face-to-face days, with the exception that obviously people are all around the world. There are some slight time differences, and instead of breaking out into a hotel lobby, you might break out into a Zoom breakout room. But Vanessa, I'll stop when you need me to, but I would thoroughly recommend the programs. I think the rewrites of the programs are exceptionally good. And from a participant's point of view, I wish I'd done this one rather than the last one. And COVID hit in the middle of it as well, so it didn't really help. But thoroughly recommend the programs. It's just really a question of, I suppose, who do I want to do this with? Which one is most appropriate to me? But if you've got any questions about is it worth it, 100%, I would say.
Thank you very much, Lyndon. And I think, you know, I think it reiterates a lot, hopefully, of what's come before, and it gives you a really true perspective from somebody who does the job of facilitation and has done the job as a participant. We can write the days, but actually, until we know what they're like when they're tested on the face-to-face days, we don't know, and the same applies for the online. And it's really good to hear, you know, that from a facilitator how good they are, but actually sounds like a sales club, doesn't it? But actually participants come back and say to us that, you know, it's really good. I understood where the face-to-face day material sat with the online, and actually when I went to apply it in school, it's really made a difference. So it's not just about gaining knowledge and having that evidence base to gain the knowledge. It's how do you actually put it into practice in your own schools, because otherwise it becomes not purposeless, but it actually becomes much more purposeful if you can see the point of it. And I think, Lyndon, thank you very much for putting that forward, and the importance of not being on your own. You can sometimes be alone, but on your own, and the importance of collaboration. And we do encourage you. I can see there's a question in the chat box about we put you geographically as close together as we possibly can, so that we can form those informal WhatsApp groups geographically. But we also encourage that as part of an online group as well, because online you're not geographically together. We deliberately put online groups non-geographical, apart from perhaps if you're international, so that you can have a different network of people that you can learn from. And sometimes, you know, if you're up in Thirsk or down in Herefordshire or Hertfordshire, things are done differently, inevitably, and you can learn from one another, because different authorities, different schools, different contexts do things differently. And just as important that, you know, primary and secondary mix, we don't have primary only groups or secondary only groups, because we learn from one another about how, as phase leaders, what's common, but actually what's different, and what we need to know about one another. So it's a really important point. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to pass on to Jamie, who's going to talk you through the important bits about money and fees and funding and how to apply, and some of the subtle differences that there are in some of the application routes that you can take. So Jamie, if I move that on.
Yes, thanks, Vanessa. Great. So as I'm sure many of you are aware at the moment, the DfE currently have a scholarship scheme in place across England. So if you're a school that is a state school, an academy, or an independent special school, you'll receive 100% scholarship for all of the NPQ fees. And to answer one of the questions in the box that's just come through, is you can do one after another and currently get them scholarship funded for. There's not a guarantee at the moment of how long the scholarships are going to be available for. So we're expecting, obviously, for the spring intake and then going into the next academic year, but it's difficult to say for the moment, going into the following year and into sort of 2024 and beyond. But obviously we'll keep everyone posted as that comes about. If you're not part of or one of those types of schools I've mentioned above, so if you're in an independent school, then there's two options for you. There's the course fees on the screen here, which can be paid via school, via an individual, or a mix of both. And same applies if you're an international school, if there's any international participants on the call. And it's great at the moment. At the last count, we've had 76 different countries join our programs this autumn. So if you want to play country bingo, it's been quite enjoyable to go through the list and see where we've had all the participants from and group them together into various cohorts. But the second option for independent schools, if we go to the next slide, Vanessa.
Yeah.
Is looking at the apprenticeship funded routes. And this only applies to the NPQH and NPQEL at the moment for spring. But essentially, what's possible is to get the program funded through the apprenticeship levy. And so it becomes a dual award with a senior leader level 7 apprenticeship standard with the NPQH or NPQEL. And as I'm sure you're aware, but apprenticeships now are for new employees or for existing employees. So anyone can be an apprentice, no matter their level of experience or where they are in their career. And especially in the independent school sector, what this gives is a much more a very rounded qualification that delves into the best of business as well as the best of education, and focuses a lot more into things like finance and HR, which in independent schools you have to take a lot more of a deeper dive into than perhaps you might do in the state sector. So you can get it funded through the apprenticeship levy and get a wider qualification for doing so as well. And obviously this way you get it funded rather than paying for the standalone course. So kind of good on both accounts there. But if you're interested in finding out if you're a part of an independent school, do get in contact with us. On the last slide, there's our inquiries email address, and I'm very happy to have a discussion with anyone afterwards about those. And I think there is a webinar coming up about the apprenticeship specifically later in the week. Sorry, yeah, you're right there, Vanessa. You're on cue.
Yeah, it's there. I'm just saying it's there. There's your webinar link. So I'm sure if there's an interest, they can make sure they get that link. Sorry, I flipped onto the next one.
No, that's good. And then the final slide before we come on to questions is that in terms of next steps to view and start the application process, all you need to do is go onto our website. It's onto the bestpracticenet.co.uk or the outstandingleaders.org website. On there, you can view each of the programs in more detail, the specifications, and then apply directly on our website there. In the meantime, as well, I would recommend for you to speak to your school or your MAT CPD lead. Speak to your head teacher or to whoever your line manager is, and make sure you've got kind of their backing to proceed with the program, because that'll be part of the process later down the line. But it's all kind of good practice to get them on board with what you want your professional development to be over the next 18 months as well. And then if you have any questions at all, we've got a team at hand. Either on our website, we've got a live chat function, so you can speak to us straight away, or you can email us, or you can give us a phone call, so we can really liaise with you in whichever method you prefer to go through. And then everything, as I said, is then completed through the NPQ web pages online, and the application process is fully open for the spring, with a deadline of the 16th of December, which I think is about 3 weeks away, which I think is very scary. But there we are, nearly Christmas. And so I think that comes to the end of the presentation. So we'll move on to questions. Tom, I don't know if you want to.
Sure, I can dive in here. Yeah, thank you all. Really great presentation, Lyndon, Jamie and Vanessa. Really good stuff. If anyone has any questions, there are already a few in the Q&A box, but please put them there, and I'll put them to our panel now. So let's have a look. Nicole Spink, are we able to find out where/when the face-to-face meetings would be before signing up? I'm very keen, but I have to think logistically with my childcare and viability. Jamie, what can we say about the group locations?
So if you want to know specifically, I would recommend for you to get in contact with the inquiries email address. If you let us know where you live and where you're based, we'll be able to advise where there's been training previously. Until we've got all of the applications, it's difficult to guarantee they will be in that place again, because it's ultimately down to where the full, we look at the full cohort and then decide on the best places around the country. But we should be able to give you a good idea of where that's likely to be.
Thanks, Jamie. I think I saw a figure yesterday. We've got about 1,000 groups running across the country for the different intakes. So you should not be far from a group. Cheers, Jamie. This is from Anonymous. If you study an NPQ, are you still able to get funding for a further NPQ? Jamie, I think you answered this, and yes you are. As long as you've finished, I think. Finish your first NPQ.
And you can't do the same NPQ again, if that makes sense. But yeah, you can do another NPQ once you've completed.
Brilliant. Do people try and do the same NPQ twice? Are we that good?
They love it that much, Tom.
You can't.
Brilliant. This is from Michelle Alongi. What are the deadlines for the applications for NPQH? Jamie?
16th of December.
16th of December. Yeah, get those applications in by then, and we'll start processing them. This is from Anonymous. Would the course be impacted if you moved school before completing it?
So if you want, I can answer that.
Please, Vanessa.
Yeah, we can. So it does happen. People do get new jobs, do move around the country. No, is the easy answer. You can complete your NPQ whatever, as long as you have a school that you can do the formative assessment tasks in. So it's not a problem at all to move from one school to another and still complete your leadership qualification.
Actually quite common. If you think now the program, especially over 18 months, people change roles, people change schools quite frequently, actually.
And the other thing I would say, and it's probably not something to say per se when you're first applying, but we know things do happen to people, so there is always an option to defer. We talked to you at length about why you're thinking about doing it, but again, if something happens, and things do happen in life, you don't have to just stop. You can defer, bank what you've done, and pick up with a new cohort. So there's always that possibility. So we know that people sometimes start families, have bereavements, have to move, and timing's not right. So there's always that option to defer onto the next cohort.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vanessa. This is from Kath Dobson. Do you have the application questions available? Do you have to complete the application in one sitting? I think, Jamie, are you closest to the application form?
Yes, yeah. So I don't have them available to me right now, but it takes about 15 to 20 minutes and can be completed in multiple sittings. Just make sure you hit save each time.
Brilliant, thanks. This is from Megan. This has been great. Thank you. Thanks to the panel. When is the spring start date, please?
Spring starts officially in the first week of February. So your induction would start in the first week of February.
Brilliant, thank you. This one, I am a IKS2 phase leader.
Lower key stage 2 phase leader. I think probably be, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vanessa. Save my blushes slightly. I'm a lower key stage 2 phase leader that has started post in September, and I sit on the SLT meetings. I'm in my 4th year of teaching now. Am I suitable for the SL course? I want to progress to being a deputy as my next career step. Lyndon or Vanessa?
Yes, it's the easy answer. Yes, you could certainly do SL. Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem. It's probably the right route as well to do SL, and then consider, once you've done SL, the moving towards headship one after that. But don't jump the guns. Do your SL first, and then go on to your H after that.
Brilliant, thanks guys. Rachel Leslie says, what sort of tasks need to be carried out in school? I am in a hospital school.
Right, okay, so for each of those cycles that we presented to you, the 3 main ones, you have a choice of formative assessment tasks. They're always related to one of the content areas. So for example, Linda was picking up on culture. So it might be that you take something that's related to culture and you pick that one, or it might be something related to professional development. So they're very open-ended so that they can be applied in any context. So it doesn't matter actually what your context is, whether it's hospital, school, independent, special school, it's absolutely fine. You adapt it to your context. And it's about applying the learning in a particular area into the context that you're working in, so it becomes more of a realistic way of saying, what can I do with the learning that I've taken? So it's very much application in context.
Brilliant, thank you. This is from Anonymous. If your school leadership don't want to support for the course, what happens? I think that is that's essential.
Yeah.
That's an application kind of aspect, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, so unfortunately you do need your school leadership to support you to undertake a program, partly because of the time out of school, but secondly, because we need their, it's called sponsorship, but essentially it's for them to be there to support you if and when you need it as part of the program. And we feel as a provider, it's part of best practice to have your employees on side with your professional development.
Right, cheers, guys. This is from Nicholas Comer. Apart from the face-to-face sessions, will there be an impact on the school day during the course, as in needing to being out of class?
No. So the way that the structure's organised, the face-to-face are the only set dates that you have. The rest of it is within a window. So, for example, your online learning is a 3-week window. You can choose when you do the learning in that 3-week window, and the practice activities that are linked to that. You choose when to do that. The formative assessment task is a 3-week window that either follows on from the online learning or overlaps with it slightly. Again, you choose when you're going to do it, and you do the fact application in school as part of the normal work. But there might be something, if you're stepping up your role a little bit, you might need that support to perhaps look at it more strategically. And then the only other time that you might want to negotiate some time is when you come to the summative assessment task and you've got that 8-day window. We don't for 1 minute think it's going to take 8 days for you to do it, but you might want to negotiate some time away from the classroom in that 8-day window to be able to focus on the summative assessment task.
All right, great. Jamie, Nicole's laptop froze. Could you just quickly go over the group locations again?
Yes, if I can remember what I said. So essentially, yes, if you contact us on inquiries at best practice, we'll be able to advise put on there where you live, and then we should be able to try and advise where there is a face-to-face location that we've run in the past. However, I just wanted to make it clear that it depends on exactly where our applicants are based, because we base it around that, so it's as close to a hub as possible. So the maximum we normally have people travel is 90 minutes, although I don't want to guarantee that, because ultimately it will come down to the final makeup of the cohort that we've got joining. But get in touch first and we'll be able to advise further.
I think, Jeremy, there's some places where we have quite a lot of groups in an area, like the Northwest can be quite busy, the Southeast, yes, the Southeast can be quite a lot of options. So again, Southwest, less options. Okay.
And
right.
I mean, the same question from Nicholas, just jump on, Tom. So about face-to-face over Zoom. So we've had applications from places like the Isle of Man and right in the corners of the country. So I think I'm right in saying that you can access Zoom links, although we'd recommend that you should go to face-to-face wherever possible.
I would say that I know, having had a conversation more recently, some international are virtual, some are face-to-face. So we know that international is hard to put you geographically in a big area. UK, we try and avoid Zoom wherever possible. Very few groups are doing it virtually. As Lindsay said, it works. We now do a full day, but it doesn't beat being in a room with people properly. That's why we encourage face-to-face. Shall I answer the pace of course? There is a very clear structure to the cycles, and you'll see that if you apply and you get onto something called Canvas, then you have a calendar. So you see what the calendar or the syllabus of time frame is, and you'll see very clearly when those different components of the course, like the online, open. But having said that, we do that to make sure that you ideally complete one cycle before you start the next cycle to keep you ticking along. So there is some flexibility in the time frames. So you can work within a 3-week window to suit yourselves. But we also know as an organisation that sometimes, and it has happened, and we deal with it on a case-by-case basis, that sometimes things happen and one cycle gets away from you. In that case, what we recommend is that you work on the cycle that you're currently in. So if you're currently in cycle 3, you work on cycle 3 in the time frame allocated, and you go back to cycle 2 and complete what needs completing for engagement. as well as your own learning. So that engagement, 90% engagement that you must have, that's a DfE requirement, 90% engagement, and that you complete that out of sync, if you like. But ideally, you would stay in sync within the flexibility of each of the cycle components.
All right, brilliant. That takes us to 5 o'clock. There's one more question. When is the window for applications? And it's right now.
Now,
Open until the 16th of December. So get your applications in. But if you've got any more questions, all of our details are there. Big thanks to Jamie, Vanessa, and Lyndon for joining us. There's one more question. Can you quickly get that one, Jamie?
no,
No.
is the answer. There's no expectation you have to become a head teacher.
Okay, and okay, one quick one from Emma Bayliss. When is the leading behavior webinar? I can answer that. That I can actually pop in the chat all of the upcoming leadership specialist webinars. We've got one tomorrow, one Wednesday, one Thursday. I'll pop those in the chat now. Thank you all for attending. It's been really nice. If you've got any more questions, get in contact with us. We've got loads of resources on the website if you want more information. And yeah, big thanks once again to our panelists, and have a lovely evening, everybody.